All right, so first of all, big shkayach to Dovi Adal for sponsoring this morning's learning and breakfast. It should be a schos lili nishmas, his mother Yenta Freida Blima Bas Rifal Avram. It's not the art set, the neshama shavanali anyway. In the schos of the learning and the brachas being said in the food, and in that only shever brach v'atzlach should come to him. All mishpach, all of kilo of Klal Yisrael. Okay, so I'm thinking that this morning we're gonna finish off the shtickle mini series that we started already from the beginning of the summer about the Inyan, or at least one aspect of Yemais Mashiach. So again, what we've been talking about, this will be, I think, the sixth shir on it. So to sum it all up together, Halach L'Maisa. So what we've been talking about, basically, this entire time, has been a certain aspect of Yemais Mashiach, which is the return of Malchus Beis David, the return of the Jewish kingdom, of Klal Yisrael, as a nation, as a kingship, as a kingdom. And so we've been talking about Barichas and Halacha and in Pnimius and Avodas Hashem and B'chsidus, all different ways. One basic yesod, which is that Malchus Yisrael, the kingdom of the Jewish people, never really went away. Again, on a simple level, when we had a Beis HaMikdash, then there was a kingdom. The Jewish people sort of had a consciousness of Klal Yisrael. Instead of a bunch of individual people, individual kehilas, you find with people that have a collective government, there was a Metzias. The Metzias of Knesset Yisrael, with all of its potency and all of its power, like we talked about, that Indian of Knesset Yisrael is that part of it's that ability that the Jewish people have to really experience Elokus, to experience God. But Knesset Yisrael, in its fullest form, was out in the open. That's how we lived. And so we talked about Barichas again, in Halacha and in Pnimius, that when the Churban Beis HaMikdash took place, when we go into Galus, so it looks like on the outside that Knesset Yisrael, Klal Yisrael, that collective entity, is no longer functional. We're now a bunch of Yechidim running around, trying to avoid bumping into each other. But that's not the truth. The truth is, as we saw Barichas, is that Knesset Yisrael, the Malchus of the Jewish people, instead of it disappearing, it went into hiding inside every single individual Jew. And throughout Galus, Malchus Beis David, Mashiach, the Knesset Yisrael exists. It just exists behind the scenes. And so he spoke about a number of different, reverberations of that. The fact that within every single Yid, there is all of Klal Yisrael being forced into that little vessel called the individual Jew. So it has its reverberations on the outside. So we talked about the greatest of Torah Shpal Peh. We talked about the Indian of finding a Nekuda Taiva, all the different avodas that come from that, the ability to find within yourself that part of yourself that's bigger. Okay, the Indian of Knesset Yisrael. So I've been mentioning a few times that this is sort of a cornerstone in the writings of Rav Kook and the whole philosophy of Rav Kook. And so this morning, we're going to dive in. I mean, we can't, it's in a half hour or so, we can't really fully unpackage his entire worldview, but a little taste here and there. But this was a major yesod that all of his writings are coming from. And so the first Marmokim sort of just sums it all up that we've been talking about, just to sort of reintroduce the idea and see how Rav Kook puts it. So Marmok number one, this is a few lines from a sefer we have, Oris Mi-Oifel, Lights from Darkness. That's the name of the particular kuntris. And so he says like this, it's in Pis Chafein, Oris Mi-Oifel. Tokum Sukas David Anifeles, right? So we know, for example, on Sukkot, by benching, we say Harachaman, that Rachaman Yakum Lanu, that Hashem should have compassion, and he should rise, he should erect Sukas David Anifeles, the fallen sukkah, the fallen home of David HaMelech. In other words, Malchus Beis David is now fallen and it's in disarray, and we want the kingdom of the Jewish people to be erect, to be fully functional. Takum Sukas David Anifeles. That's the lashon, that's the language that we use, that it should be erected, it should be put together. Now it's not, and it should be put together. It says Rav Kook, Ach Be'emes, but the truth is, Loi Takum, it doesn't have to be put together, the truth is. It's a little mistake. What's going to happen with the coming of Mashiach is that it's going to be revealed that the sukkah of David, the house of David, the Malchus of the Jewish people, never fell apart to begin with. So right now it looks like it's not there. It looks like the Knesset Yisrael, with all of its power, all of its glory, is non-existent. And so right now in Golus, we daven that the Malchus of the Jewish people should come back to life. But the truth is, when Malchus Beis David, so to speak, comes back to life, it will be revealed that it never really went away. Never really went away. Ar emezeh, this light of truth, ki yizgala, when it's revealed that the Malchus of the Jewish people never went away, rather it was just in hiding within every single Jew. When that truth is revealed, it's going to be so powerful and so potent a realization that Malchus Yisrael cannot be destroyed. Knesset Yisrael can never go away. Then that itself will give us a guarantee and a confidence that the Gula that we're going to experience with the Mashiach is going to be a Gula forever. Oyel Bal Yisan, it's a tent. Malchus of the Jewish people is a tent that cannot be folded. Bal Yisa Yisadais of Lenetzach, its foundational parts cannot be undone forever. The Gam Chavol V'Yonatku, the ropes that hold the tent down, cannot be undone. Zois Yakim Atzafula Knesset Yisrael, and this is really the return that the Jewish people is hoping for. That the whole world really is involved in preparing. And this is a big ending by Rav Kook, that he saw even the nations of the world, and in modern times, everything they're doing is also just preparing the way for Malchus Yisrael to, resurface. But that's the idea of it. The Malchus Yisrael just has to resurface. It doesn't have to be put together. Knesset Yisrael already exists. Okay. So in Rav Kook's way, Rav Kook saw this not just as a nice idea and a theoretical thing, and even something that affects one's personal avodas Hashem. Rav Kook saw this as something. He saw this as the sugya that was unfolding literally before his eyes in the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s. We all know that historically at that time, the walls of the Shtetlach were coming down, the walls of the ghetto were coming down. There was unbelievable influence of the outside world, and great effort was made to try to bring Jews into, the societies and the cultures of the world. And Yidden, unfortunately, we're falling off of Yiddishkeit in droves, mamish in droves. People that learned in yeshivas, that were grew up in the shtetl, grew up in that environment. Once they had the opportunity to see something bigger in their mind and so on and experience the world, they rejected Yiddishkeit. A lot of them went off. So all the isms, communism, socialism, Zionism, you name it, all the isms, they're all Yidden. They're all Yidden. And I was told by someone that his father was a survivor, and he said that before the war, he was from Hungary, he said you get on a train and you get anywhere, and if it was Yidden on the train, all for me, and if it was Yidden on the train, it was mamish like colors of rocket, mamish crazy, because everyone was fighting with each other. It was communists fighting with Zionists, and Zionists fighting with Bundes, and Bundes fighting with the religious side. It was just everyone. There was a lot going on. There was a lot going on, and so there's always two approaches about how to define, and the objective of the tzaddikim was obviously to fix this, to make sure they didn't stop going off the derech and reconnect themselves in a deep way to Yiddishkeit. But in order to fix the problem, you have to really identify what the problem is. Like, what's the source of the problem? So what is the source of the problem? Why was it all of a sudden now that religious life and the way of the Messiah for 1,000 years was all of a sudden not appealing to the younger generation? So, and if you can identify what the source of the problem is, why is that, then you'll be able to fix it, hopefully. So there's two approaches to understand what the source of the problem was. One approach, which was taken by most Gedolim and most parents and Mechanchim and so on, which is Midas. No, it's just a bad generation. It's a generation that has a big Yetzer Hara, big Taivas, and all of a sudden, for the first time in many centuries, we have the opportunity to fulfill their Taivas because the walls of the ghetto are coming down, and they're actually being invited by all the universities and all the other countries to be part of their societies. And so you're being invited and enticed by the snake, and you have a shtickle nachash inside of you. So fine, that's what's going on. So that's the problem. The problem is just schlechter. They're just bad people. They're just it's just the older generation were more tamimistic. They were on a higher level. Plus, they didn't have the opportunities, and so now you have the opportunities. Plus, you have a shirish that's no good inside of you. So that's the problem. So if that's the problem, then what's the solution? Well, the solution is twofold. Those that already went off the derech, cut them off, because they're bad. They're going to take down everyone else. That's one malach. And those that have yet to go off, you have to be afraid that they will, and so you have to make sure to put up those walls of the ghetto very stark and thicken those walls, and do whatever you can to just control everyone and bring them back into that old Messiah. Like it's a very defensive stance, because that's what's going on. We're under attack from without and even from within. We're just under attack. And so when a person's under attack, there's automatically a survival mode that comes in. And certain things that you do in survival mode that you wouldn't necessarily do in a regular situation, sacrifices that you have to make. But that was the approach of many people. Rav Kook did not see it like that. Rav Kook did not see that as the solution, nor did he see the ultimate source of the problem just because of some problem, bad quality in the generation, and opportunity to fulfill their taivas. He did not see that as the issue. Rav Kook identified that the core issue is actually a positive thing. What's going on, Rav Kook said, is that as we're getting closer to Mashiach, something's taking place. And what's taking place is that that inyan of Knesset Yisrael, of the sum total of the Jewish people, which in a healthy way is living in Eretz Yisrael with all of its grandeur, all of its power, that during Golus has been locked up inside the heart of every single individual Jew, ad kedei kach, to such a degree that the individual Jew doesn't even know himself that he has Knesset Yisrael inside of him. Rav Kook understood that at this moment in world history, that inyan of Knesset Yisrael is beginning to bubble up to the surface. And the Jew, all of a sudden, because within him, subconsciously, he doesn't know this, but subconsciously, there's a part of himself that sees himself as an individual. That's a golistic mindset. I'm an individual, you're an individual. But there's another deeper part of himself which is now surfacing that no longer wants to see himself as just an individual Jew, but wants to experience Knesset Yisrael, wants to experience a life where he's a part of this collective nation that's called the Jewish people. Not only is that something that he wants to experience deeply, but the Yiddishkeit, as we're going to see, the Yiddishkeit that part of the Jew, which is Knesset Yisrael, wants to experience, is a Yiddishkeit that's completely all-encompassing. See, the Yiddishkeit of an individual, of a Golus, is compartmentalized. It's a Yiddishkeit that's, that Avodas Hashem is in this corner, and politics and business is in another corner. But the concept of Knesset Yisrael, what does Knesset Yisrael mean? Knesset Yisrael means the entirety. Knesset Yisrael means like Jewish firemen. And Knesset Yisrael means everything in life, spiritual, physical, political, the arts, the humanities, everything is part of that world that's called Knesset Yisrael. And if there's a certain element of life experience that's not somehow part of that world that's called Knesset Yisrael in a holy way, then a Jew that's deeply connected to Knesset Yisrael is going to find a religion that rejects a certain aspect of life experience as small, as tiny, as constrictive. And so Rav Kook identified that it's not the pshat that people are going off and going into all these isms because they are rejecting it. There's something bad in them and they're rejecting the truth of Yiddishkeit. What they're rejecting is a small, tiny Yiddishkeit that's custom made for just an individual person in Golus. But what they do want, what they are asking for, without having the sophistication to articulate it, because Lamaisa, but we'll see in a second, the generation Rav Kook was talking about were not educated with sophisticated and big ideas of Yiddishkeit. They were educated in that small way of Yiddishkeit that's custom made to an individual person that exists as an individual in the Sea of Exile. And a Yiddishkeit that's custom made for an individual person within Golus is a Yiddishkeit that only addresses certain aspects of his life. So a Yiddishkeit of Golus will address your mind, what to think about in terms of learning. It'll address how to daven. It'll address how to put a mezuzah on the door. But it's not going to be addressing how to be a farmer. And it's not going to be addressing how to be a contractor. And it's not going to be addressing being a politician. And it's not going to be addressing being a poet and being a painter and being a singer. Those aspects of life, those aspects were not part of a Yiddishkeit of Golus. That's not what it was. But a Yiddishkeit of Knesset Yisrael, a Yiddishkeit of Gula, that's all, just like the Jewish people are all-encompassing. To have a nation, functioning in Eretz Yisrael independently without having to schlep or to collect money from the goyim to function on its own, then you need you need all these things. You need poets, and you need artists, and you need construction people, and you need policemen, and you need politicians. You need all these things. And so a Yiddishkeit of Knesset Yisrael demands that all these aspects are somehow part of Knesset Yisrael. Instead of having to outsource all these elements from the nations of the world, that it should be something that's developed and evolved and emerging out of the kedusha of Knesset Yisrael. And so this Rav Kook saw this as the great nisayon of the generation, of being able to realize that the need that the younger generation has to venture out of the walls of the ghetto, it's not coming because they're rejecting Torah mitzvahs. What they are rejecting is a Yiddishkeit that's only addressing a particular part of life. What they want is a Yiddishkeit that addresses every part of life. Why all of a sudden are they asking for such a Yiddishkeit? Because the Knesset Yisrael, which is the whole picture, right? That was until now deep down in the heart of the individual Jew, but didn't really make itself known, is now beginning to surface. And that Knesset Yisrael, that national way of thinking, which and a nation encompasses everything that a nation needs, both physical and spiritual, and again, like all the humanities, everything that a nation would need. The Jewish people want to have that that's coming from Yiddishkeit. In other words, if the Yiddishkeit of Golus is forced to create a Jewish government and a Jewish malchus, what it's going to have to do, if the Yiddishkeit of Golus remains as it is and is forced to now make a Jewish malchus, what it's going to have to do is it'll be able to give instructions about how to deal with the quote-unquote religious side of that kingdom. But the other elements of that kingdom, whether it be the humanities, the Gashmi side of things, is going to have to outsource with the nations of the world. It's going to have to go to America, it'll have to go to Europe, and it'll have to get advice about how to handle these things and how to do it. And then all of a sudden there'll be this division within Malchus Yisrael, which is Chas v'Shalom, that the Ruchniya side of things is coming from a holy place, but everything else is coming from unholy sources. And that's something that is distasteful to Knesset Yisrael. Knesset Yisrael wants to have everything Jewish. Knesset Yisrael wants to have every element of Klal Yisrael coming from authentic Jewish places. It's like there's a brisa in Yisachas B'chayros that Rameir said. It's a brisa Rameir says, "Ashrach Yisrael, the Jewish people are so amazing. Why? Because we're compared to Karcha de Kulaba. We're like a Swiss Army knife, right? It has everything you need. It has a knife, it has a pair of scissors, it has a screwdriver, it has a flashlight, whatever. Everything you need, you got." So said Rameir, the same thing with Knesset Yisrael. Everything is, we don't have to outsource for anything. We have our Nevi'im, we have our Malachim, we have our kings, we have our prophets, we have our Rabbanim, we have our Shaitrim, we have our... And Rav Kook identified that Nekuda, that's a Knesset Yisrael mentality. It's a Knesset Yisrael mentality where everything that you need to function as a nation on planet Earth that's of divine origin, you should be able to figure out within yourself, that you don't have to go to other sources to find it. And so this Inyan that was bubbling within the surface of the younger generation, the need and the desire to experience a Yiddishkeit of Knesset Yisrael, they without realizing it, what they were really looking for when they went to socialism and communism was that what they're really asking for is, I want a Yiddishkeit that somehow explains and it somehow gives me a way of understanding the dynamics of a government coming from Kedusha. I don't want the Yiddishkeit that just addresses Hilchas Tefillin, but everything when it comes to a government, I have to look to Goyim. But the problem is, again, as we'll see in a second, that's not what they were being exposed to. What they were being exposed to was still a Yiddishkeit of Galus, which is a Yiddishkeit that's not addressing Knesset Yisrael. It's a Yiddishkeit addressing a Jew in Krakow. How does a Jew in Krakow survive through Krakow? Okay, so for a Jew to survive in Krakow, all he needs to know is how to put on tefillin, and how to keep Shabbos, and how to learn and daven, and he doesn't have to know about the poetry and the arts and humanity. He doesn't have to know about that stuff. That's not his Inyan. But what happens when that Jew in Krakow has within him all of Knesset Yisrael bubbling to the surface? Then all of a sudden, the Yiddishkeit that he's being told is a Yiddishkeit that's constrictive, that's tiny, that's small, and what he's looking for is something more expansive. So he's going to go to look for it elsewhere. This is how Rav Kook identified the issue. So Rav Kook saw the issue as coming from a very, very good place, a place that Klal Yisrael are moving towards Geula, towards Knesset Yisrael. So what's the solution? So Rav Kook, as we'll see, the solution was, therefore in Rav Kook's mind, is not to cut off, to stop. The solution is to give them what they're really asking for, which is a Yiddishkeit that's a Yiddishkeit of Knesset Yisrael, a Yiddishkeit that's holistic, that's a Yiddishkeit of synthesis, a Yiddishkeit of uniting spiritual and physical, a Yiddishkeit of uniting halacha and machshava, of nigla and nister, of a Yiddishkeit that gives opportunity to express yourself in the arts. You know, in his day, for example, and nowadays it's not as much, but in those days, in the early 1900s, a huge Indian of self-expression was poetry. That was a big thing, right? I'm sure we had, like in high school, you had poetry, right? Most people were not interested in it, but in the early 1900s, that was like a major thing. Poetry was like a huge Indian. You know, people would go to read poetry recitals and it was like a big thing. It was like a concert. That's how it was. You know, nowadays instead of poetry, it's more like music and painting and things like that. But in those days, it was poetry. Rav Kook was mamish an eish lahav of fire to produce from holy writers and poets, to be able to produce poetry that's giving expression to a deeper Yiddishkeit. Instead of, again, so you have a guy that all of a sudden, like he grows up in Prague, right? Or in Vilna, or something like that, or in Tashkent, whatever it is, and he doesn't even realize it. So his parents are, every single Jew throughout all of history had the entirety of Knesset Yisrael within them. But in the earlier generations, it was locked up in such a way that it didn't really surface at all. So inside of every single Jew throughout all the ages, there was this desire and this need to experience a Yiddishkeit that's holistic, that's all-encompassing. But it didn't make its way to the surface of the mind. So to the Jew throughout all the generations, living in Vilna, from Bobby to Zadiel, they're all living in Vilna. So they were happy, even though within them, certainly they also wanted a Yiddishkeit that's all-encompassing, but that's not what they were living with. And they were satisfied with a Yiddishkeit that's addressing them in particular, how they can survive and thrive in Vilna and become tzaddikim in Vilna. But that type of Yiddishkeit doesn't need poetry, it doesn't need painting, it doesn't need architecture, it doesn't need all that stuff, because it's what are you doing in Vilna? You're just trying to eke out a living and make sure you get Olam Haba. That's what you're trying to do. So, but all of a sudden, this guy's son, the Knesset Yisrael within them, is now surfacing, and so all of a sudden he's being educated in the same way that the Zaidi was, but it's not the same Yiddishkeit that the kid needs. It's not a different Yiddishkeit, but it's a more holistic and encompassing Yiddishkeit. A Yiddishkeit that doesn't look at architecture and doesn't look at paintings and poetry and getting your hands dirty in the dirt of Eretz Yisrael and growing tomatoes. The child wants to experience a Yiddishkeit that embraces all of that, not just embraces it like a b'diavad, but sees that as the greatness of Yiddishkeit, that it encompasses all of that, and we don't have to outsource our farmers to the nations of the world. That it should be homegrown. It should be the proper way, which is it's all emerging out of the kedusha of Knesset Yisrael. So if the kid in Krakow and in Prague and Vilna is not being educated like that, but that deep desire needs to be fulfilled, and then all of a sudden the walls of the ghetto are down, and he hears that in Berlin there's universities and you can study about all these things. Okay, so that's where he's going to go, but he's not going to get away from Vilna. That's basically when him going to Berlin is him expressing that I want something bigger in my Yiddishkeit, and you're not giving it to me. And so Rav Kook's whole Indian was give them what they're really interested in, which was extremely counterintuitive to every other one of the Gedolim, because what Rav Kook is basically saying is that you see this guy who's Mechal Shabbos, you see this guy who's running away from Yiddishkeit, what really you should be doing is giving him a deeper Yiddishkeit than his parents have. And again, a deeper Yiddishkeit, this guy is Mechal Shabbos. So while he's Mechal Shabbos, I'm supposed to teach him secrets of Torah, and I'm going to reveal to him deep ideas. He doesn't deserve that, and he's not living up to it. Rav Kook said, this is the difference. Rav Kook is saying his outside life is not living up to it, but that's what he's asking for. And if you give him those deep ideas, then guess what? Then all of a sudden he's going to realize that the Yiddishkeit, that authentic Yiddishkeit, a Gula, Knesset Yiddishkeit, satisfies all of his needs. And he doesn't have to go to Berlin to find it. He can find it within himself. I mean, this was a major Indian Rav Kook, for example. Like there's letters that we have from Rav Kook when the first school in Eretz Yisrael, I think it's called Betzalel school of art, right? It's for people to come to learn how to paint and the arts. So there was a letter when they were opening. So again, I don't know much about this stuff. I just know it from the Sefer. So I don't know. Like, so as people are listening to this, like, I don't want to get the impression that like I'm giving Haskama to go to Betzalel School of Art. Maybe at this point in 2022, it's all apikars. I have no idea. I'm just saying, like, that what it was. Rav Kook sent a letter to as an opening thing, to give them a shkoyach, and he talks about this. It's an unbelievable letter where he talks about the need of human beings, the whole idea of human beings needing to express themselves in art, and how throughout Golas, and he says, you look at the Mishkan, the nations of the world chop this and took this and corrupted this skill and with the Zaras and also is something that really is by the nations of the world and just knew, what could I do? I have a little desire in me to make painting. So Yiddish, that's not part of my Avodas Hashem, but I have no choice but to go to the going to the... No, it should be homegrown. It should be like a Swiss Army knife. This was Rav Kook's whole opinion. This was true in his way of viewing the whole world of Knesset Yisrael. This is how we view Torah, that Torah should be learned in such a way that should be with synthesis. It shouldn't be this like pulled apart thing. There's halach on one side and pnimis on the other. It should be holistic. The whole inner of Kook was just this holistic sense that everything should come together in that way. And so that's basically in a nutshell. Again, in a very condensed form, the whole worldview of Rav Kook. But it was coming from this place, and you could tell already why it was with such opposition, because it's extremely counterintuitive. You're dealing with people that are violently opposed to Yiddishkeit, and Rav Kook is telling you that what they're really asking for is Yiddishkeit. And while they're smacking you in the face, and while they're punching you in the face, and with pickets, picketing in front of your home about how you're archaic and all your ways are old, and we have to move on to the new times. What they're really asking for is we need pnimis haTorah. We want deeper truth, and that's what you have to do. While they're punching you in the face, give them pnimis haTorah. That's very counterintuitive, but that's what Rav Kook said. And he said he saw that as the only solution for the generation, the only solution. So let's see it together inside. Yeah. Okay. With that, we can be able to run through this pretty quickly. So Maramaka number 2. It says a piece from Sefer Iris. Again, we're just going to run through it, and you'll see it's Rav Kook himself was a poet, so it's all written in poetry. But hopefully the point will get across. And by the way, the fact that Rav Kook wrote like this is an Arichas Dvarim, but the fact that Rav Kook wrote, as we'll see, in such poetic ways, so it led to people misunderstanding and not fully grasping what he's talking about. But this is how he wrote. He couldn't express himself any other way. It's interesting. The writing that we have from Rav Kook, that's all poetry, is only once he got to Eretz Yisrael. We have Sfarim from him before he got to Eretz Yisrael, which was written in a very down to earth. It was big ideas, but it was written in a down to earth